Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about Commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host. He's a little sad, though, that the Commander named Loot doesn't actually have a looting ability. It's Matt Morgan.
So Joey, a friend of mine recently won a baking competition, and I told her, oh, that must have been really hard for you to do. And she said, it was just a piece of cake.
Okay. Well, you know what? When someone wins something like that, you really got to hand them their flowers, don't you, Matt?
Yes. I think she actually needed to win that just for her personal ego. So I'm glad she did.
Needed. I see what you did there. That's terrific.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Matt, it's the two of us on this week's episode. What are we chatting about this week?
So I love personality tests, finding a way to find common ground with people. And I love the love languages especially. And so this week, we're going to adapt that to see what the love languages of Commander is, and maybe even the Myers-Briggs personality types for Commander players.
Yeah, we've each brought forward some ideas about how to conceptualize what it is that we like about the Commander game and what we get from it, and how we can use those to find better games with other players. So Matt, I'm really excited to dive into this with you for sure.
Same.
There are a couple of things we want to let people know about, though, if they want to support us.
Yeah, if you would like to support the show, there's lots of ways you can do that. Whether you want to like this video, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe in your local podcast apps. That's just easy, simple ways to support the show, which definitely adds up. We appreciate all that support. But if you would like to, you can go to patreon.com/EDHRECast. We have patron tiers of all sorts of levels. Whether you want to join our Discord community, you want to see all of these episodes a day early, there's all of that and more over at patreon.com, which includes the tier where you can be in the running for the weekly patron shoutout of the week. So this week, we want to give a very, very special thank you to Matthew Robichaux. So I am so glad you didn't Rochambeau your way away from patreon.com/EDHRECast. You did the right thing. Plus, you just have a powerful name. And so, Matthew, thank you so much.
I knew that was going to happen.
For having your support, and kudos to you for just being a powerful name person.
I knew that Matt could not resist.
Listen.
There's too many Matts. I'm outnumbered.
Listen, game recognized game. That's all I can say to that.
Heck yeah. All right, Matt, let's start talking about this interesting way of approaching your Commander personality. You had conceptualized a little bit ago this idea of your Commander love languages, and I would love for you to walk me through it.
Well, so this actually is something that we've been talking about for a long time. We had a conversation with our friend over at the Spike Feeders, Jim LePage, and I just love the way he approaches things and how you analyze different people and how to find ways to relate to them. And one of those things that I do a lot, Joey, and I don't know if you do this too, is finding out just on your friends, what are their love languages? What is their Myers-Briggs type? And all these, there's a million personality types out there, but two that I think are actually helpful to start conversations, not end them, but start them, are those two tests. Do you ever use those in just regular day life?
The love languages, for sure. If folks are familiar with those, that's a way that you can relate to your partner, for instance, and ways that you spend quality time, or giving or receiving words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, physical touch. Those are definitely important, and they've helped me contextualize, my own personal romantic relationship. But it is neat to also understand how those things can be important to other people too. Matt, I'm sure you've picked up that I'm definitely a words of affirmation guy.
You definitely are. Yes. Oh, and if you've seen us at events, I'm definitely a hugger. I'm physical touch through and through. And so
I was just going to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can see those come through. And probably most folks here probably knew that anyways. But one thing that I really like about them is how you can start conversations and you get to kind of see how you can relate to people on their levels. Yeah. And how could we adapt that to Magic the Gathering? I feel like Magic is kind of in a big flux right now with the rules committee disbanding and Wizards taking over the format. So they're working on ways to kind of identify in the pregame conversations, how are we trying to find a game? What do we want to play? How are we going to relate to each other? And this is one thing that I think is kind of us putting forward in an official manner, tools and conversation tips that we found for ourselves that we want to pass on to the listeners.
Yeah, for sure. This isn't something, as you noted there, it's not meant to be prescriptive or to put an end point on that discussion. Absolutely. It's more of a way of actually opening up a conversation and finding overlap with other players. A way that I like this idea as well is we're kind of just trying to better conceptualize ourselves and what it is that we like about in the game. And that enables you, when you have a better sense of your own self, that it makes you better at having an open and honest conversation with other players about what it is that you're after, so that you can all get the thing that you enjoy out of Commander. Because we all definitely enjoy a lot of different things about Commander. It's a big, big game.
Yeah. And so the goal with these love languages, so there's 5 options that we'll go through, and the goal is to prioritize your top 3. So when you're talking one-on-one, if I name off 3 of these 5 options, and Joey, you name off 3 of the 5 options, at bare minimum, we're going to have one of those goals that overlaps, and we can really focus in on that and kind of derive what commanders are we going to play, what kind of decks are we going to play, to really dive deep on the one common thing that we had going on. So Joey, if you're trying to figure out if you want to play your Sir Conrad deck or your Marina Haunted House deck, those are 2 very different decks. And so you're able to kind of focus in on which of these options and kind of goals from a game everybody at the table wants. And that's what we really want to help kind of focus people in on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping to line up my Marina weird theme deck where everything has to feel like it's in a haunted house against one of your theme decks, or play my Conrad deck against your, I don't know, Omnath deck, and not have a situation where I'm playing my Marina Silly Rooms against your Omnath deck and you completely raffle stomp.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that you and I definitely know about each other already, but these are hopefully some tools that like kind of help folks find a new way into discovering those types of connections.
Yeah, you're always making friends. You want to connect with them. So I think with that, let's get into it. So there are 5 of these goals that people would like to kind of get from games. And like I said, you ideally would pick 3 and communicate those with folks. That's kind of the idea that was kind of behind these goals here. So the first goal up is I did something powerful. You want to sit down and be able to do something that's impressive and maybe warps the game or just gets that ooh and ah factor from everybody else at the pod. It's something that is big, it's going to make a difference, and everybody kind of looks in and it draws attention.
This is the thing that both Timmy's and Spike's can really, really agree on, because it's something very, very impressive, as you said.
Yeah.
An example for me would be when I cast my Mimeoplasm and turned it into a copy of, like, I don't know, an Emrakul, the Promised End, and then it's got a whole bunch of +1 counters on it. It's just like, y'all, I'm attacking for 80 with my commander. Whoa! Like, that's something mega powerful and definitely game warping.
Oh, yeah. For me, I definitely remember the first time I ever resolved a Rishkar's Expertise. And on that same page, I remember the first time I resolved Last March of the Ents, because it's only happened twice. But either way, like that's the high of doing something powerful that I definitely have been chasing for years.
The next one you'd noted down here was I did something meaningful. And this is separate than just something powerful and impressive. Something meaningful means that you contributed to or changed the course of the game. Were it not for your involvement, something about that game would be very, very different. And so you made your mark in some way is what this one's about.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember there was a game that we sat down and we were intentionally playing a little more powerful decks, and somebody was playing stacks, and it puts a lot of pressure on a game. So me being able to meaningfully get rid of that stacks player, I had to flicker Ukima, which has a leave the battlefield trigger, deals a bunch of damage to somebody's face. That was kind of how I contributed to make sure, okay, well, now the rest of us are going to play the other 3 players at the table.
Right, yeah. And your involvement there was crucial. Or an example for me is like, you know, it's maybe a game that I didn't win, but what I did do was at the right time remove someone else's Mirari's Wake to slow up that archenemy opponent number X, not letter X, number X, which then gave opponent number Y the ability to have enough time to get out from under that. And that really changed the course of what that game would be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so our third point is I did something well. I played technically proficient. I am a skilled player, and I got to express that in the game. I think that Dana probably relates to this one specifically the most. But for me, I mean, just any highly interactive deck. Like, I play my Council 4 deck because I want to make sure I'm playing the right answers at the right time. I'm stealing the correct creatures, doing things when I should be doing it. And I think a lot of players in the CEDH realm, this is probably the common denominator in every single game.
For sure. Or an example for myself here is when I'm playing my Yannette deck that cares about the top cards of my deck. That's one that I have to be in the mode to, like, I am playing proficiently, because I need to set up the top of my deck very carefully to get the right stuff off the top of the deck for her to cheat into play, or stuff that I won't. That involves a lot of, like, mega brain power, which I'm not always in the mood for. But when I'm playing her, I definitely am, and playing well is a huge ingredient in that. And
so next up, we have our fourth goal, which is I got to do something interesting. And so finding new interactions and or maybe just learning something from the game. That's something that is huge. I think a lot of newer players always want to be learning things. I know for sure with me, I'm usually discovering interactions on accident, just how I happen to be as a player. When I first had my Omnath Locus of Rage deck, I had Amulet of Vigor and Perilous Forays. And I didn't realize that was kind of a free way to get all of the lands that have a basic land type onto the battlefield, because Amulet of Vigor pulls them and makes them untapped. And then Perilous Forays, I can sacrifice the elementals that are getting made, and then the land I pulled taps for mana. So I oopsed into a combo, and I felt really bad that I told the pod beforehand, I don't have any combos in here. And then I made sure to learn from that mistake, and so I could communicate better in future games.
I think this one can also be just about like discovering cards too, in addition to the synergies. I recently played a game against a listener. Shout out to you, Quinn. I played my Vohar Reanimator deck, and I had the card Soul Exchange in there, which is kind of a weird reanimation effect. You have to sacrifice and exile one of your own creatures to bring something back, and it gets a plus if you sacrifice a Thrall, which is not usually a thing that I care about. But Quinn was delighted to discover a card that could be put into a Tevish Zot deck, which makes a bunch of Thralls. And that was a fun moment of discovery for the whole table, and definitely something that it seemed like Quinn prioritized. So that was also a learning experience there that clearly brought a whole bunch of joy.
Yeah, I mean, just everybody likes to learn. Most Magic players are, you know, kind of the intellectual types. They want to learn. And especially if you're using EDHREC, you're listening to the show, you want to learn lessons from the game. And that's, I think, is probably a common denominator among a lot of our listeners.
Finding something that you can take away from that game that improved you as a player, wonderful moment to live in. Then the last one that we've got here is, I did something unique, something that can't be replicated just anywhere. And Matt, I love that you put this point here, something that led to a cool story.
And something that leads to a cool story doesn't always have to revolve around the cards that are being played themselves. They might be adjacent to it. Joey, you and I, when we first actually got to meet in person, it was Grand Prix Kansas City several years ago. But we played against a friend of the show who they had a Varchild deck that was all about making survivor tokens.
Yeah.
And those survivor tokens were little plastic figurines. And it was so funny getting to sit down and just like handing out these little plastic things, little figurines to everybody at the table. It was so funny. I will not forget that. I don't remember anything else about that game. Nothing about the cards that were played other than here's a little token for you, here's a little creature for you. And it's just these little, I mean, the size of my thumb, really, little plastic babies.
Yeah, that was definitely something very, very unique. Another one for me, myself, I'd say like I've recently gotten to win with a door to nothingness where target player loses the game. And like that's a card that I'd opened in a pack ages upon ages ago. Like genuinely so long ago. And I'd never actually gotten it to work ever because it costs 10 mana to activate that ability. But I do have it in a deck now, and it was silly and funny, and I'd never done it before. Like that was a unique experience that everyone was just like, whoa, is this really happening? And that led to a really fun moment. It created a memory for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun just getting to walk away and there's something that you get to remember that game by. Maybe not the weekend or anything like that, but making sure that there was just one moment. And it doesn't have to be, you know, something hyper specific, but just I remember this happened. Like I don't remember how I got all those tokens or what we did with them. I just remember they existed.
Yeah. So, Matt, looking over these love languages, do you have a particular one that you place as like a top priority, or the main three that you think you hover around here when you're looking for Commander games?
Yeah, so if I were to formally start using this as a conversation starter at events with strangers, I would definitely say I want to do something powerful. I like doing the big splashy things. Listeners of the show, you don't need to be reminded that I like to do big splashy things. But the other two I would say is definitely going to be, I want to do something meaningful. I want to contribute and have an active role in the game. And also I want to do something unique. I want to have those stories happen every game. And obviously they don't. Sometimes they just, the cards don't fall that way. But I love it when you can have a memorable story to walk away from the game with. And so I would say those are the three: is doing something powerful, doing something meaningful, and then getting to do something unique. What about you, Joey?
I think for me, the ones that probably I prioritize most end up being, I definitely want something meaningful to happen. And that goes for not just like my love language, but what I hope the rest of the table also gets to experience as well. I hope everyone can contribute to or change the course of the game in some way.
Yeah.
Matt, I think you'll also know the next one that it matters a lot to me. And honestly, let's be real, a lot to Dana, is the playing well. Like I want, some technical proficiency in my plays. That is a way that I find a lot of joy in the game, is solving the puzzle that's in front of me. And often the decks that I gravitate towards, like my Babala Saga or like my Barakos deck, those are commanders that ask you to fill out a puzzle in order to get the rewards. Give me these certain types, and how can I do that in the coolest or in most interesting sequence of ways? And after that, I think Probably I'll go with, I want to do something interesting. I like finding something new. I like learning more from that game and learning more from other players. Those are probably the three that I most often tend towards, I think. And that means that our overlap here ends up being, we both want to make sure that something meaningful happens in that game. Every person does something meaningful.
Yeah, and that's not really a surprise, just knowing each other too. We both like it when people are able to have a sense of agency over what they're doing in the game and contributing in meaningful ways. And this also, all of these rules, I want to make sure that people understand, it doesn't apply to just what I want to do. It can be applied to, I want everybody at the table to be able to do X. I want the table to experience Y.
Yeah.
And so, yes, right now we're just, for the sake of explaining it to everybody, it's, I would like to do this. But really, I would like the table to be able to do something interesting and find these new interactions of, oh, how does your deck interact with my deck? And I want, Dana at the table to also have a memorable story to walk away from. And so it's not just about what the things that you as a person want to do. It's about that social experience too, especially because people talk all the time, and Sheldon Menery, when he was writing his articles, he always wanted to remind people, Commander was intended as a social format. It's a format for you to enjoy and experience with others. And so we definitely want folks, when you were thinking about these 5 items here, extrapolate them out to your pod mates too.
Yeah, I think that's especially important to note for instance, my goal of, I want to learn something. I want something interesting there that will I can improve and take that later on. That's not going to be everyone's energy. No. If we're playing a beer and pretzels type of game, and that might be something that I enjoy about the game in general is learning stuff. But if everyone else is in the mood of just like, hey, we're kind of kicking back, we ain't going to take this too seriously. If someone misses a trigger, ain't no big deal. Yeah. That's totally cool. And that is upon me to realize, like, how can I adjust what my expectations are, what my, the usual love language of mine. I can put this away for a while to make sure that everyone else gets theirs fulfilled.
Yeah, and I think so much of this, it revolves down to being a good partner too. You use the love languages to put, your personal biases aside. Like, I would say playing well is not a love language of mine in Commander, kind of like how acts of service isn't really a huge thing for me, but for my partner, it could be.
Right.
And so for me, it could be a huge thing for my pod mates to, you all want to play technically well. I typically don't, because that's just where I've gotten to in my Commander career. I've played well for tournaments. Mm-hmm. But for the sake of, I'm going to sit down and maybe I'm trying out CEDH, where I would wager a majority of players wants to play technically well in every game. That's a goal that they have. Either I put that aside and find a new pod, or I be a good pod mate and try to play technically well with them. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that you can kind of just keep on your own personal radar too, to make sure you're being aware enough to accommodate the people that you're playing with.
Yeah. Oh, Matt, I absolutely love that, because it is true. Like, I'm big on words of affirmation in my relationship. Mm-hmm. My husband ain't. My husband's big on acts of service. But like, he also understands that about me, and I understand that about him. And it is about, making room for those, because it isn't just about how you give, it's also about how you receive. And that has to go for like the other people in that situation. So if there is that overlap, honing in on those things, and that allows us to like find the ways to adjust. Yeah, that's huge. And notably, we just named a couple of things, like we've got some different love languages in Commander, so it seems, Matt.
Yeah.
And we've played so many games against each other, and they've all been rad.
They have been. And that's why I really like the idea of doing this in execution, is telling people 3 of these 5. That's way, no matter what 3 you pick, if the other people also choose 3, between each one of you, your pod mates, you're going to have at least one goal that overlaps. And so finding those things that do, I think it's such a healthy and just positive way to find common ground with the people that you're playing, even though you may have never met them before. And if you're going to MagicCon Chicago next year or whatever, you're going to play a lot of games with strangers, but that's also kind of the beauty of going to MagicCon. So you get to play so many games with so many different people, and just having a better way to communicate expectations of what you like to do. It costs nothing to do, and really takes 15 seconds once you know what you're trying to tell people.
And Matt, let's be real. I think there's going to be plenty of folks out there who are like, this is a little cheesy, or I don't really have time for all of this. It doesn't have to be an actual huge mega part of a big pregame conversation if you don't want it to be, but understanding these things about yourself, having a better conceptualization of what you are after, and also being able to read that from other folks, that can lead to a better situation of finding the unspoken agreements. Like, Matt, before we were using language like this or any specific correlations or conceptualizations of this, we had pretty decent abstract ideas of what it is that we were after. And we were able to clock pretty easily what the other person was after too. And finding more concrete terms just solidified those and made it even easier to have those games going forward. So even if you never actually make this an official conversation, it's still a useful tool to understand more about yourself and understand more about others so that you can find the overlap.
Well, and there's a phenomenon too called therapy language, where you talk overly communicative, you're overly wordy for the sake of you're in therapy at that moment. But you can still take those lessons and those principles and apply them to everyday conversations. So say you're sitting down and you know the three things that you want to say. Like, so I want to tell people I want to do something powerful, I want to do something meaningful, and I want to do something unique. So in conversation, in execution, I can just sit down and express that in the way of, all right, I like doing big and powerful things. I want everybody to kind of participate, and that's what I keep in mind. But also, I want to make sure that everybody like has a weird story, that we play decks that kind of lead to that. That took me 8 seconds to say. And that was everything that we're talking about summed up in a quick introduction about, hi, my name's Matt. Here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully that can be a cool tool to help people figure out what it is that they are indeed after in these games of Commander when they're playing it both against friends and against complete strangers. Hopefully this is a way that strengthens some of those connections.
Yeah.
Matt, it isn't the only tool, though, that we might be talking about here, the only conceptualization of self.
True.
You had mentioned some Myers-Briggsy stuff earlier.
We did.
Some personality archetype situations that we might want to dig into. I think we'll save that for the latter half of the show. How about we move to challenge the stats and then we get into some other personality quirks a little bit later?
Let's do that, because I also like the Myers-Briggs, and I'm curious how we're going to translate that into Commander.
Well, I will start us off with Challenge the Stats this week, and this is our listener-submitted challenge of the week from our Discord user, Gabriel GS, who has just named a card in this Challenge the Stats that I will be immediately putting into one of my own decks. I mentioned that I have a Barakos Folk Hero deck earlier. That is the black-white party deck that cares about having rogues and clerics and warriors and wizards. It'll make you a bunch of treasure tokens when you have those party types, and the Folk Hero will draw you cards off of that. That's really cool. I love that deck. I love the puzzle that it presents, and I love finding weird rogues and wizards and stuff like that. And Gabriel GS has the card Moriok Rigger that they would like to share here. What a neat piece of tech. Moriok Rigger is a 3-mana 2/2 human rogue that says whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Moriok Rigger. It's showing up in just under 900 decks at the moment, and in a grand total of 1.2% of the 3,500-ish Barakos Folk Hero decks out there. This is a rogue, which means Barakos is going to draw you a card. And it says whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, you get +1 counters on it. This is going to be a big rogue because Barakos is making all those treasure tokens. Like, finding something that responds to all the treasure tokens that are out there in the format in general seems pretty important, but this doesn't even rely upon you metagaming against other people maybe having treasures. This will draw you a card off the Folk Hero. This will get big all on your own using the Barakos treasure tokens for mana. This is really, really cool. I cannot wait to use my unblockable spells in that deck to make this huge human rogue get in for a bunch of damage. Gabriel, thank you so much. I'm really excited to play this card. Thank you for letting us know about it and challenge the stats.
Well, let me get to my challenge next. And so this is one that I've always been intrigued by this card because of how many different places it could be slotting into. So the card is Spark of Creativity, which is 1 red mana for a sorcery that says choose target creature, exile the top card of your library. You may have Spark of Creativity deal damage to that creature equal to the exiled card's converted mana cost or mana value. And if you don't, you may play that card this turn. So we don't very often get cantrips, just a single red mana to potentially draw a card outside of blue. And so red getting this kind of impulse cantrip type of ability or removal if you really need it, there's a lot of flexibility that I really, really like here, especially for only having 1 red mana in the mana cost. It's kind of like a lot of the cantrips you get in blue with like Peak or Obsessive Search, Opt, those types of cards where it's just do a small action and then draw a card. But if you're playing in a lot of decks that just happen to have a very high mana value, this can absolutely just be a 1 mana kill target creature, which is also super valuable. You can use this to cantrip out to find another answer, dig 1 card deeper. I've been playing this in my Faldorn Dreadwolf Herald deck, and it's absolutely just amazing to have 1 mana, be able to flip another card and keep that engine going. It's super, super valuable in a lot of those types of decks, where especially if you're trying to play things out of exile. It's currently only played in 5,900 decks total. Any commander you look at, it's played in basically 5%, except for Zada Hedron Grinder, which can be a massive, massive draw spell then. So I just really think that Spark of Creativity does a lot of very, very small things that add up into a lot of flexibility. So if you need a nice flexible card, check out Spark of Creativity, especially in, say, you're in a Spellslinger deck that doesn't have blue. This is a great way to keep the card draw going, or just a nice way to have some flexibility within your deck. So check it out if you're playing any of those decks.
Matt, I really like that in Faldor. And honestly, this kind of reminds me of a lot of those little grease the wheel types of cards that you enjoy playing, like Scale the Heights and stuff like that. Yeah, I feel like you're finding more and more of those to incorporate into your deck building these days. And when you do see them in game, it's a little understated, but I think it's unquestionable that they do help you have a much easier game and help you find those wins later on.
I mean, if Dana can have Knight's Whisper, I can have all these, whatever the term we want to coin for these cards that don't do anything great, but they do a lot of little things well. It absolutely could be a whole category.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, dude, now we're going to get into the second half of our show, and we've teased a little bit here about the Myers-Briggsification of commander personality. Another way that we kind of want to discuss how you might be able to better conceptualize yourself and what it is that you enjoy about commander, what you're after in commander. Matt, you said that you're a fan of Myers-Briggsy stuff, the INTJs and the ISFPs and things like that.
Yeah, so I went to a small Christian school in the early 2000s, which is where this kind of exploded, and everybody loved these, obsessed about them. Really? I don't think that they're the best way to completely know somebody, but they are a great starting point. They're a good way to, again, like so many of these tools that we like, they start conversations. They get you kind of relating on a common ground, and you kind of know better how to relate to folks from there. That's my relationship. And there's a million of these, but I think Myers-Briggs, most people know what it is at this point.
Yeah.
And so this is a good way for us to kind of take something people know and adapt it to Commander.
Yeah, for the record, I'll personally say that I don't like endorse Myers-Briggs as like an actual personality thing necessarily. Like it's actually kind of proven to not be a very effective predictor of behavior. I'm just like, but it is fun to like find a way of figuring yourself out. And that's really the thing. Like you said, Matt, it's something popular and hopefully a way of conceptualizing our own selves here. And we want to apply that to Commander. And there are a couple of different things, much like Myers-Briggs, that we've kind of drawn a bit of a dimension across, a bit of, here's one side of the spectrum and here's the other side of a spectrum, and you can place yourself across a couple of those different spectrums. So where Myers-Briggs is doing stuff like introverted versus extroverted or thinking versus feeling, what are we starting with? What are some of the spectrums we're taking a look at for these?
So there's 4 questions that we can ask folks to give a binary answer on. The first one is just going to be the attitude towards the format. And the 2 options here are just, are you social or are you competitive? Are you more laid back and looking to kind of enjoy the games with the other folks, or are you more competitive? Are you more worried about the outcome of the game? Are you more concerned with winning versus who you're winning against?
Yeah, obviously this isn't to say that all CEDH players are antisocial, or that social players can't ever play competitively. No. But in general, what do you tend to build towards is kind of the thing here. Matt, definitely in our cases, we know that we like to play a lot of social stuff. We play games that'll go, to turn 10 and to turn 11 and things like that. I would say here for myself, even if I don't categorize this as like a CEDH deck, a competitive option of mine, a more cutthroat option of mine would be like my Mimeoplasm deck. I'm making a lethal combination out of that. Versus my Marina Vendrell deck, which is a very silly, janky room theme. And I've thoroughly de-optimized the crap out of it. So those are probably some extreme examples on my end of like commanders that might fit a certain bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's super hard and people want to give a sliding scale. There's a reason that saying my deck is a 7 was such a joke for so long. Yeah. And so making sure that you're kind of committing to one of these binary answers is what's going to be helpful too, because then it doesn't let you kind of have that middle ground to fall back on.
The second one here speaks to the intentionality behind the cards that you choose to put into your deck. And Matt, what we've picked here are expression versus optimization. So I had just mentioned Marina Vendrell. That is a deck that is doing a whole lot of expression with the card choices there. I'm choosing things like false floor and cards that reference rooftops and walls because I want the joke of the deck to be the house versus the optimized thing. When I'm playing my Sir Conrad deck or my Babala Saga deck, you best believe that I'm finding every every inch of value out of those things that I can. And those are two extremely different considerations, extremely different ways of how I built those decks.
Yeah, and you can definitely have a combination of them. I think there's 16 results total with having these 4 different categories. And so you can definitely be somebody who plays on the social end of the format, but also does like to optimize. You might be doing something silly, but you're going to do it right. And so there's definitely ways that you can kind of navigate this. And same way, you can be somebody who wants to play competitive. You want to play to win, but also you want to do it in your own way. You want to express yourself with how you're doing the victory, or getting to the victory, I should say. And so make sure to keep in mind, like, yes, when folks think of competitive, they're automatically going to assume competitive and they play towards optimization. That isn't necessarily true.
Yeah, there are plenty of competitive players who like to find some silly moments for sure, or who want to show off something that's a little bit more on the strange or creative side. And there are plenty of people like us who enjoy the kickback beer and pretzels type of thing, but we also like expressing how much value we're able to find from that. Like you said, do it silly, but also do it right. I think that's a great way to characterize that, Matt.
Yeah, and so the third question that we have here is, what motivates you to build a deck more? Is it the legendaries or is it the 99? So do you matter more about what is helming the deck? Are you building a deck dedicated to a certain commander that sparks your interest? Or are you doing it like I do, where you like to build from the 99 and then build from there? You find a commander that accommodates the idea for the deck that you had in mind. It's definitely something that doesn't necessarily have a default for most players.
Yeah, I would say that like an example for you here is the Panharmonicon deck that you've got. You've switched commanders on that list a couple of times, and that doesn't change the heart of that list whatsoever. You were looking for an ability to double up a whole bunch of enters the battlefield triggers.
Right.
That's a very different thing than me, where I'm just like, ooh, I saw a commander I like, and I'm going to build the entire deck around that to support that commander, because the commander, the character, like that is what intrigued me. Whereas you, and also let's be real, Dana as well, you like finding these things that are like kind of niche. There's an interesting strategy and interesting synergy that doesn't have a clear, definite commander, and you're building from the ground up to accommodate that. You are finding, Dana wanted a deck that cares about incubate tokens and happened to find a commander for that. He wanted a deck that cares about planeswalkers and happened to find a commander about that. He definitely leads with concept first, and the 99 is really what's important. And the legendary will sit atop it for sure, but the legendary is not the one that's responsible for why that deck was built.
Yeah, I think Dana on here definitely goes to the 99 because he wants to be able to say to people, oh, you think this card isn't good? It's not good in your deck. And he's going to find a way to make sure that he has a home for these off-the-wall cards that just suddenly are just absolutely powerful in the right deck.
Yeah, absolutely. He wanted a deck that cares about his own life loss. And it looks like Tivash happened to fit that bill. You and he both wanted to build a deck that cares about Eldrazi scions and spawns. And you both found different engines, different things to fit that as well.
Yep.
But the Eldrazi scion and spawn part, that's what really intrigued you.
Yes.
That's not necessarily how I build. I'm on the complete opposite side of that spectrum most of the time. I'm leading with the commander and finding a way to support it. I'm much more of a commander-centric player than a commander-agnostic player. And that leads to this kind of interesting binary, interesting different spectrum that leads to most of our commander deck building choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll wrap up. So the fourth question here is, how do you choose cards or your commanders? Do you like the popular cards, or do you tend to be a little bit more of a hipster? And I think if you've listened to more than 2 episodes of the show, you know what Dana would be picking here.
Yeah, Dana's total hipster. And I think that's a big difference that I tend to have with him. Like if Dana saw his own commander across the table from him, he'd be like, well, I gotta take this deck apart. I can't play this deck anymore. He really likes having that very specific uniqueness to his to commander choices, to his card choices. Whereas me, I'm very comfortable playing something that's popular because I know that I just like that thing in general. Or like, the Ur-Dragon players. Dragons are awesome. So like, it doesn't matter if the Ur-Dragon's popular or not. What that deck is yours, and it's doing something that you really enjoy. And that can be another different way of engaging with commander decks and why we build them.
Yeah, and this absolutely applies to the 99 of your decks as well. It's not just the commanders there. Cyclonic Rift is just obnoxious to play against. I just don't want to play it. Are you going a little bit against the grain? Or if you're me, you're trying to find cards that kind of get the same goal done, but you have a little bit of upside. We like to rant and rave about how great 5-mana Wraths with upside are, because you can customize your board wipes. This is kind of an expression of that hipster factor being executed. I really like Whelming Wave because it's a nice way to have a board wipe that doesn't hurt me. And so there's all sorts of different ways you can express if you're playing just the staples of the format, or you like to dig for those hidden gems a little bit more.
And to be clear, there's pride in both of those things.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, finding hidden gems is really, really fun. That's why we enjoy the challenge to stats segment so much. But it's also not the only thing that defines or that makes you a good commander player. Playing stuff that also happens to be popular and that a lot of other people know well, and finding other ways of making it yours, even just through the way that you play it, is also a really big ingredient in that too.
Yes.
And so that's something to hit on for each one of these. None of these are necessarily like antithetical to each other, and we all have little bits of these at all different times, but there are certain ways that we might trend more in one direction towards another, and there are good reasons to do that, and really thoughtful and interesting reasons that make you better commander players when you do both.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's super fun to kind of take that lens back towards yourself and make sure, am I really like A, being honest with myself, but also B, am I able to be honest with my podmates? Am I able to tell them what I like to do, what motivates me? And be able to contribute to that pregame conversation in an honest and meaningful way. And it's something that I think so many players are doing a better job of, is being honest and being just expressive with how they're handling those pregame conversations.
I really think that's it, is like, this is a moment of self-reflection, right? Like we've done episodes in the past of like, Dana and I tracked our game data for an entire year, and I've been doing it again this year. And I'm really looking forward to that episode coming out in a little bit once we finish up 2024 to find a whole batch of new data. But looking over it, I did have to do some like pretty thorough re-examination of some things, because certain decks of mine were a lot better than I thought they were, and certain other decks were certainly much worse than I thought they were. And that is a way of holding myself to account. That is a way of making sure that I'm honest about which of my decks really are more cutthroat than necessarily I thought they were. And that's what this is about as well, is just figuring out like, am I as social as I say I am? Am I actually interested in like the expression, or do I keep on finding ways to optimize? Is that actually what draws me towards these things? Am I the top-down legendary matters deck that I think I am, or is there a concept that I've been sitting on for a while that I kind of don't care what the commander is? I just want to like make that deck work. Like these are all different things, different facets that we should confront ourselves to thoroughly examine, to see, just make sure that we're honest with ourselves, like you were saying.
Well, and if you're honest with yourself too, and you're able to identify fully, I build from the 99 and find a commander that accommodates what I want to do. If you're able to be honest with yourself on that front, you're able then to find ways to challenge yourself too, and you can push yourself outside your normal comfort zone, because you know what your comfort zone even is to begin with. And having that self-awareness for sure is super, super valuable if you're trying to grow as a Magic player.
That's huge. Yeah. Knowing what your comfort zone is in the first place is exactly the way to phrase it. That's kind of a way that we engage with EDHREC sometimes. If you want to build the stuff that isn't popular, it's sure nice to know what the popular stuff is in the first place so you can avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, at the same token, you know what to look for. So, okay, well, I am looking for the popular stuff. I need to make sure I'm not forgetting any must-play staples. Oh, here we go. So you're able to kind of cut both ways with that. You know what to avoid, but you also, know what to look for at the same time.
Yeah, you know what to look for so that your deck can actually do the thing that you want that deck to do in the first place, stuff like that.
Yep.
Matt, this does kind of beg the question, if we've got this social and competitive as our first option, expression versus optimization as the second, legendary versus 99 as the third, and popular versus hipster, if you're putting together an ENFP or INT whatever thing, what
I am an ENFP. You're correct.
You are. Okay, I believe I'm an INTJ, but I don't recall completely.
It's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while since the Myers-Briggs may not be super relevant, but the Myers-Rex that is relevant. Please don't use that, folks. That was off the cuff. So with this, the personality type here, though, that we have lined out, I am an SENP. So I'm a social, I'm an expressive, I'm a 99, and I'm a popular. I don't mind playing the popular things. It is fun to find a gem or two, but for the most part, like, I want to do the thing that's going to let me do the thing. So I do
the thing.
I don't hate playing the popular things. Yep. I want to do the thing. Yeah.
For me, I might characterize myself as the SOLP. I'm a SOLP.
Okay.
That's fun to say.
Sure.
But that's going social. I like to optimize. I definitely build with the legend first in mind. And I also don't mind something popular as long as it's doing the thing that I want to do. And that tends to be a whole lot of reanimation. Is there an R in here that we can put for reanimation, Matt? Can we update the list real quick?
There is not currently a reanimation, but I don't know if that would roll off the tongue very well. A sulper.
Sulper?
That sounds, I mean, I'm a senp, if you think about that. And that also like already sounds bad.
And also, real quick, since I think folks are probably curious, to speak for Dana on his behalf, he's not here right now, but we do know him pretty well. So I think it's safe to say that he's also a person who plays very socially. He enjoys optimization. He likes doing the thing right, as you said, Matt. He is definitely focused on the concepts within the 99 first and foremost. And he is our resident hipster. If it's popular, he doesn't want to play it.
Much a hipster.
He's looking for off the wall because he does just exactly what he's about. So that makes him an SONH, I suppose.
As a son, yes. Yeah, totally makes sense. I always knew he was a son, yeah.
Now, I don't expect anyone to actually go around introducing themselves with these. I think that'd be more than a little bit gauche, if I'm being really honest. This is more for me a personal exercise to figure out what is it that I'm actually after? What do I really enjoy? What do my commanders seem to most often fall in line with? And what will therefore be appealing to me when other legendaries get spoiled in preview season? What are the things that actually draw me towards them? That's an awareness that I want to have about myself. Not a label I am excited to put on myself and other people, but just like, I kind of want to know what my genre tendencies are.
See, I'm actually going to be super flattered if people start introducing themselves in pregame conversations at events saying, I'm an SOLH, or however they want to do that. I think it'd be fun. Or honestly, I would rather people use the love languages type, the goals from every game, because I think that is actually something helpful. Myers-Briggs translating it to Commander is a fun thought exercise. I fully don't expect that to come to catch on.
Yeah.
But being able to communicate the goals that you want, I think that is super helpful. And that was really kind of why we sparked this whole conversation, this episode today.
Yeah. For us, it really is just about like understanding ourselves so that you can figure out what it is that you like building, what things intrigue you. And also to be more aware of that in other people too.
Yes.
As a famous philosopher once said, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? That kind of applies here. Like you do need to have a good sense of your own self to figure out what other folks are after and how to honor what it is that they're after in those games so that everyone enjoys themselves. If you're out there wanting to play something that is more competitive, I want to meet you where you're at.
And not just meet you where you're at, but do it in a way that I can show up for you.
Yeah.
Being able, if you're forcing yourself to get yourself out of your comfort zone to meet somebody else, chances are that like that's kind of where some shaky interactions end up happening. And so showing up in a way that you know how to for somebody else, that's where you're able to really make connections, because you're still doing it in a safe way for yourself, but you're meeting the other person or your pod mate where they need to be met. And so that's why I really like being able to find what common denominator I'm looking for in a game with 3 other people, and then we can really focus in on that. And then it's just going to lead to such a better experience all around.
Matt, I really, really like you hitting on that point, because it isn't about sacrificing a piece of yourself to make someone else happy, because there's no way that ever goes well.
No, that doesn't work in Magic, in relationships, anything. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite philosophies, like quotes, is you shouldn't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm.
Definitely should not do that. No.
Well, like you do have to like prioritize yourself and honor what it is that you're after, while also seeing if you can help others.
Yeah.
And in that case, I love what you just hit on there. It isn't about like removing the thing that you enjoy so that you can make other people feel better. It is about finding what both of you will like, or in this case, a whole group of you will enjoy, because this is a game. This is a game that we all want to enjoy playing. I literally play this game against my whole family. Like I'm there to honor what it is that they're after in the game, whether we're all leaning back, whether we're playing a little bit more cutthroat that particular time, whether we want a funny story that we can share on and on for a while, or whatever those things are. There's stuff to admire about like when someone plays technically proficient, or when you learn something from the game, when everyone gets to contribute, or when someone is able to pull off something wildly powerful. Those are all really fun moments to share with each other, and knowing what it is that everyone's after helps us all find those ways to enjoy and create memories in the first place.
Yeah, and just like anything out there, this is just a tool. This is a conversation starter that we've kind of found ourselves using in real life experiences when we go to events. We get to go play with strangers. And so this is just our way of trying to impart some of that wisdom that we've accrued with all of our listeners out there, to make sure that your games with strangers, your games with even your established playgroups, can go that much better, because we found success. We just want everybody else to have that same success in finding games.
100%. Matt, this was really fun. As you said, a great pair of thought experiments. I had a lot of fun putting it together with you and going over and, discovering a couple of things about ourselves and about each other. Listeners, we definitely hope that it's interesting to you. Let us know what your personality types are down below or what your love languages are.
Yes.
See if you find overlap, common denominators with other people. Matt, are there any final notes that you want to hit on before we wrap this episode up?
Not particularly. I do want to give a special shout out to Jim LePage again. We had a conversation with Jim years ago at an event, and this really kind of sparked it. We've been sitting on it for a while. And also, we haven't talked about my friend Andrew Cummings. He also is big into these types of tests. And so really, conversation with those two people really helped Joey and I kind of get the juices flowing to come up with this. So definitely want to shout them out and all their contributions to the format as well.
What do you know? It takes a village, huh?
It does truly take a village, yes.
It is all about collaboration with other people, understanding ourselves and understanding each other. Yeah, a really nice way to bring it all full circle, Matt. With that, I think we're going to call this episode to a close, though. So if our listeners want to get in touch with us on the onlines, Matt, where can they find you?
So you can find me on pretty much any social media platform at Mathimus55. That's MATHIMUS55. And don't forget to head over to patreon.com/EDHRECast if you would like to support the show.
And I'm Joey Schultz. You can find me everywhere online at Joseph M. Schultz, and you can find the cast everywhere online at EDHRECast. Plus, if you've got a question for us or maybe a challenge to stats submission that you'd like to send in, you can contact us at EDHRECast@gmail.com. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights, but until then, remember, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.